It was a quiet Thursday afternoon in Flagstaff, Arizona. The sky was clear, the university lecture hall half full. Dr. Paul Reiner, a seasoned archivist and researcher of fringe phenomena, was wrapping up his presentation on electromagnetic anomalies recorded during forest fire outbreaks. An obscure talk, attended by an equally obscure crowd. As the final questions were answered and the projector whirred to a stop, he noticed a man standing off to the side. Early 30s, flannel shirt, weathered boots. His posture was rigid, his jaw tight. He wasn't like the usual audience. No camera, no notebook. Just a framed photo in hand, gripped tightly, almost too tightly. Dr. Reiner assumed the man was a forestry student, but as the crowd thinned out and he approached, something about him set off a quiet alarm in the back of Reiner's mind. The man didn't introduce himself right away. Instead, he handed Reiner the photo. It was a woman, young, smiling, dressed in forest ranger green, auburn hair pulled back. The type of photo you'd keep in your wallet or on a nightstand. On the back, neatly printed in shaky pen, Aubrey Lin. She came back, but she wasn't the same. Then came the words. Not all at once, not fluently, but painfully, like someone choking on grief and fear at the same time. I know this sounds insane. I know, but she saw something in the forest. And when she came back, it wasn't her, not entirely. Reiner had heard dozens of strange stories in his life. Alien abductions, ghost sightings, lost time, unexplained lights. But rarely did they come from people who looked so broken, so convinced they didn't want to convince anyone. This man wasn't telling a story to be believed. He was telling it because he didn't know what else to do. And that, Reiner would later say, was what made him listen. Before all of this, before the whispers and the lights and the burn marks, Aubrey Lin was someone you'd call rational. A field biologist by training, a firewatcher by circumstance. She was part of a seasonal crew hired each summer by the U.S. Forestry Service. Her job was simple on paper. Sit in a steel tower, scan the horizon, report signs of fire. But in practice, it required long stretches of isolation, often weeks at a time. No human contact, just trees, wind, and radios. But Aubrey didn't mind. In fact, she preferred it. Shane, her boyfriend, said she had a quiet strength, someone who didn't fear solitude, who found comfort in silence. Her cabin back in town was filled with pressed leaves, hand-drawn sketches of birds, and geology books so old their spines were crumbling. She wasn't the kind to chase storms. She studied them, cataloged them, understood them. By 2017, Aubrey had done 2 summers at the Kaibab Post. It was one of the more remote stations, 38 miles from the nearest paved road, perched high in a steel tower built in the 1960s. It creaked when the wind blew, like an old ship adrift in a forest of green waves. The assignment wasn't dangerous, it was dull, exactly how she liked it. But on the night of June 3rd, something broke that pattern. Shane received a text from her at 10:12 p.m., short and casual. All clear. Might be late calling in. Nothing unusual. Fire watchers often stayed up late, reading or watching stars. But at 2:41 a.m., she called him, and this time her voice was different. "There's something in the trees," she whispered. "I thought it was lightning, but it's not moving." Then silence and static. That was the last time Shane heard her voice that night. By morning, Shane's gut had turned to stone. He called the station. No answer. He tried again. Nothing. By noon, he was driving. 50 miles of winding dirt road, tires kicking dust into a cloud that never quite settled. He didn't stop for coffee, didn't call anyone. He just drove. When he arrived, Aubrey's truck was still parked beside the old ranger cabin. Her thermos was inside, still half full. The lights were on, generator humming, notebook open on the desk, pen resting atop a half-finished sketch of tree bark. Everything was normal, except for the fact that she was gone. No sign of struggle, no overturned chairs, no broken glass. But then Shane climbed the spiral staircase to the top of the watchtower and noticed the ceiling hatch had been flung open. That's when he saw it, burned patterns scorched into the wooden floor. Perfect circles, 3 of them, each about 2 feet wide, arranged in a triangle like a symbol. There were no burn marks anywhere else, just those 3 precise spots. Shane ran back down, called the local ranger dispatch. A formal search was initiated within hours. Helicopters scanned the ridgelines. Dogs sniffed the moss and dust. Rangers combed the trails. But no footprints, no scent, no trace. It was as if Aubrey had simply evaporated. She was officially declared missing. And for 4 days, Shane lived in a kind of sleepwalking hell, caught between hope and dread, unable to accept that the woman he loved had simply vanished into the trees. But then, she came back. It was 4:12 a.m. on June 8th when she walked into the gas station. The clerk on duty said she looked like she'd been sleepwalking through hell. Her hair was matted with pine needles, her shirt inside out. Her bare feet were raw and bleeding, caked with sap and dirt. She had no wallet, no phone, just a blank expression and a trembling hand. When asked if she was all right, she said, "Don't let them take me again." And then she collapsed. Shane got the call around 5 a.m. By the time he reached the hospital, she was already sedated. The doctors couldn't explain how she'd survived 5 days in the wild with no food, no water, and no signs of dehydration. She had no broken bones, no internal injuries, only shallow scratches, and an oddly shaped bruise beneath her left shoulder blade. They assumed she'd had some kind of breakdown. Shane wasn't so sure. When she finally woke up, she didn't recognize him right away. She stared at him, blinking slowly like she was trying to solve a riddle only she could hear. And then, in a voice quieter than breath, she whispered, "It's not over." She refused to speak to police, refused to talk to the Forestry Service. She wanted to leave the hospital. Shane convinced them to release her into his care. But from the moment they got home, something was off. She no longer looked people in the eye. She slept with all the lights on. Mirrors were covered, radios unplugged, and every night just before sleep, she would stare out the window toward the tree line and whisper, "I know you're still watching." The changes in Aubrey were not temporary. For days, she refused to sleep unless Shane sat in the room with her, sometimes staring at her from the hallway while she drifted off. She jumped at the sound of humming electricity, refrigerators, phone chargers, even Shane's wristwatch. Once she ripped apart the smoke detector in the kitchen, convinced it was watching her. She started talking in her sleep, but not in English. It was a breathy, fragmented language, almost like reversed audio played at half speed. Shane recorded it once. When he played it back, she screamed and smashed the phone against the wall. He didn't try again. Eventually, desperate for answers, Shane reached out to a friend of Aubrey's, a trauma therapist who suggested regression therapy. The idea made Shane uncomfortable, but Aubrey agreed. She said she needed to know if the gaps in her memory were better left blank. The session was conducted by a certified hypnotist in a controlled setting. Shane was allowed to observe through a one-way mirror. What he heard would haunt him forever. Under hypnosis, Aubrey's voice changed. Her cadence slowed. Her eyes fluttered, but never fully closed. She described being lifted from the tower, not through the door, but straight up, through the ceiling, through the air. She said the stars went out one by one, as if something massive had passed between her and the sky. Inside the craft, there were beings, faceless, gray-skinned, eyeless. No mouths, but they vibrated with sound. She said they placed her inside a clear sphere that wasn't wet, but felt like drowning. They touched her, but without touching, opened her without cutting. And then she said something Shane would never forget. "They showed me what comes after us. Not death, not heaven, something else. Something we made and can't control." Then she began to convulse. The session ended, but the nightmare was only beginning. 2 weeks later, Aubrey vanished. It was early morning. Shane had left to buy groceries. When he returned, the door was wide open. The kettle on the stove had boiled dry. Her slippers were still by the couch, but she was gone. No sign of struggle, no blood, nothing stolen. Just a note folded neatly and placed on the pillow. If you're reading this, it means I remembered, and they remembered me too. "I'm sorry, Shane." Shane called the police, filed the report, retraced every step, checked trail cameras. Nothing. He drove to the firewatch tower, hiked through every path she once patrolled, stood on the top deck and screamed her name into the forest until his throat went raw. But there was nothing. All he had left were memories and burn marks, still faintly visible on the wooden floor of the tower. He went back weeks later to scrape a sample, hoping for answers. The wood was oddly light, smooth, and slightly magnetic. But no lab would test it seriously. He called researchers, radio hosts, fringe scientists. No one would help. Or if they did, they backed out within days. Eventually, Shane stopped looking for evidence and started looking for closure. But even now, years later, he keeps a backpack by the door, packed with food, a flare gun, and a flashlight. Just in case she ever calls again, he told Dr. Reiner, or in case, they come for me too. The firewatch tower is still there, abandoned now. The Forestry Service quietly shuttered it the year after Aubrey disappeared, citing budget cuts. But the structure remains, weathered, rusting, half swallowed by pine. Dr. Reiner visited it himself, said he wanted to feel the air up there. He brought an EMF detector, a Geiger counter, and a handheld compass. He wouldn't talk about what the compass did, but he did mention this. The readings were inconsistent, like gravity was frayed around the floorboards. The circles were still visible, faded but intact, and on the side wall in pencil were 4 small symbols. Not English, not any language Reiner recognized. He sent a photo to 3 linguists. 2 didn't respond. The third said they resembled pre-contact Pacific glyphs and never replied again. The surrounding forest is eerily quiet. No birdsong, no insects. Locals say their pets refuse to go near the trail. And then there's the gas station footage. Dr. Reiner obtained a copy of the security tape from the night Aubrey reappeared. It was grainy, but clear enough. At 4:11 a.m., she appears, barefoot and wild-eyed, stumbling into frame. But at 4:10 a.m., exactly 1 minute earlier, the camera glitches, just for a second, a burst of static. And in that single frame, Reiner swears there's something above the tree line. A shape, metallic, silent, watching. Shane isn't alone. After Dr. Reiner shared the story of Aubrey Lin at a closed symposium in Montana, several attendees approached him privately. They weren't skeptics. They weren't thrill seekers. They were people with quiet shadows, incidents they'd buried, pushed down, ignored. One woman, a former smoke jumper from Oregon, claimed she saw a glowing sphere rise from beneath a redwood canopy in 2006. She kept it to herself for years, until her younger brother went missing in the exact same forest a decade later. A retired dispatcher from Wyoming admitted to Reiner that between 1999 and 2003, she logged 12 calls from isolated firewatch towers, all describing unexplained lights, missing time, or strange mechanical humming. None of the calls made it into official archives. The details varied, but the pattern was there. Remote outposts, disappearances, burned vegetation, and always silence from above. Not the kind that feels empty, but the kind that feels like being watched. Reiner started compiling these accounts, mapping them, layering them atop decades of missing persons reports, wildlife anomalies, and unexplained power surges. What he discovered was disturbing. Almost all of the reported cases, those with physical traces, audio anomalies, or confirmed mental disturbances, occurred near defunct Cold War listening posts, weather stations, or decommissioned radar towers. Like something was drawn to old frequencies, or worse, still using them. And Aubrey's tower? It sat less than 5 miles from a sealed underground communication relay, active until 1981. It raised a troubling thought. Were these things attracted to certain signals, or were they responding to something we broadcasted first? Either way, they weren't random. They were listening. Skeptics have not been silent. Some argue that Aubrey Lin never existed, that no such disappearance was logged in Coconino County in 2017, that no therapist would perform regression therapy without licensing, that Shane Morrison is a pseudonym used to propagate yet another fringe UFO myth. Others point to the convenient lack of physical proof. No police report, no lab results, no surveillance footage ever made public, just anecdotes and fear. And then there's Dr. Paul Reiner himself. Though respected in some corners of the paranormal community, others view him with suspicion. He refuses interviews with mainstream media, never shares original documents, and many of his past investigations, like the Glacier Static incident or the Narrow Lake Voice, remain unresolved, shrouded in vague statements and secondhand witnesses. But perhaps the most controversial aspect of this case isn't what's missing. It's what's repeated: multiple stories, similar elements, sudden disappearances in forested regions, triangular burn patterns, victims speaking in non-human languages under hypnosis. And the one phrase nearly all of them have said, "They showed me what comes after." Could this be the product of mass suggestion, media contamination, or something deeper? Psychologists suggest that isolation, especially in high-altitude wooded environments, can cause auditory hallucinations, light distortion, even brief dissociative episodes. But what they can explain is why different people in different decades, under different circumstances, keep seeing the same thing. Is it a hoax, or are we, as a species, brushing against something ancient, something incomprehensible, and losing pieces of ourselves in the process? The Kaibab National Forest is quiet again. The tower stands abandoned. The burn marks have faded, the roads are overgrown, and the trees remain tall, unmoving, like sentinels too patient for time. No one talks about Aubrey Lin anymore. Not in town, not on record. Shane Morrison moved away in 2020, left no forwarding address. A neighbor said he sold everything except one thing: the old radio Aubrey used to call in her nightly fire reports. It still worked, apparently. And once, just once, she said she heard static from it, followed by a woman's voice far off, garbled as if underwater. She couldn't make out the words, only the fear behind them. Dr. Reiner has since filed Aubrey's case among over 200 incidents in a private archive labeled Known Contact Events, Rural Class. He doesn't publish them, doesn't monetize them. He simply collects. Because as he says, some stories weren't meant to be believed. They were meant to be remembered. And so, we leave this one here. A woman lost in the woods, then returned, but not whole. A burn that left no fire. A sound that came from nowhere. And the echo of a voice that still asks, "Don't let them take me again." Sleep tight.